Shalom, I'm Rabbi Michael Panitz. I'm the Rabbi of Temple Israel of Norfolk, Virginia, speaking to you from the pulpit of my congregation. At this time, I'm going to speak on the following subject: Society, a Work in Progress. The Bible speaks to us from long ago and far away. We focus on the fact that it continues to have what to say to us. But we are apt to forget that the specific words in the Bible first had to speak to its original audience. That first audience was composed of people who did not share many of our default assumptions. If we neglect to factor into our thinking the differences between the Bible's first audience and ourselves, we are apt to misunderstand what it is trying to tell every generation. A paragraph in this week's Torah reading, the book of Numbers, chapter 35, exemplifies this general truth quite powerfully. It is an ordinance for the Levites to make their towns places of asylum. And I'm going to quote excerpts from Numbers chapter 35. When you cross over the Jordan into the land of Canaan, you shall set out for yourselves towns of asylum, and a murderer may flee there, one who strikes down a person in errance. The towns will be an asylum for you from the avenger, and the murderer will not die until he stands before the community for judgment. If he is a murderer, the murderer is doomed to die. The blood avenger shall put the murderer to death. But if on an impulse, without enmity, he not being his enemy nor seeking his harm, the community shall judge between him who struck and the blood avenger on these matters of judgment. The community shall rescue the one guilty of manslaughter from the hands of the blood avenger, and the community shall take him back to the town of asylum where he fled, and he shall stay there until the death of the high priest. After the death of the high priest, the one guilty of manslaughter shall go back to the land of his holding. This biblical passage reflects a society in transition. The older status quo, whose existence is recognized, although not mandated by the Bible, is the law of vendetta. The clan was responsible to avenge the death of one of its members. The nearest or the ranking member of the tribe was bound under the arrangements of society in that state to take the life of the one who had killed his own kinsman. A popular Netflix historical drama, Peaky Blinders, depicts the world of gangsters in 1920s Birmingham, England. In one episode, the senior brother of a criminal family, Arthur Shelby, is undone by the decision taken by his family to have someone else kill the man who had murdered the younger Shelby brother in a vendetta. Arthur resents the modern world for taking away from him the role that he insists was part of his definition as eldest brother. He wrote the name of his intended victim on the bullet he was to use, and he was totally disoriented, perhaps even unmanned, by having that role taken away from him. The fictional character of Arthur Shelby is an echo of the institution still present in the book of Numbers, but already being limited by that biblical text. Ultimately, the Bible wants human affairs to be governed by justice, not vengeance. Li nakam, justice, vengeance is mine, we hear in the ancient song of Moses, Deuteronomy chapter 32, God speaking, mine. Eventually, the Israelite understanding of God came to recognize that ascribing vengeance to God meant taking it out of our human hands as far as possible and replacing it with justice. Justice demands procedure, safeguards, a check on the hot blood of the angry relative of the victim. Justice inquires into the circumstances of the killing, not only the rage-inducing fact of the death of a loved one. Numbers chapter 35 introduces an important distinction that still underlies our laws today, the distinction between premeditated murder and manslaughter. That is part of the process of substituting justice for vengeance, a first step in the Bible. Historically, the institution of Goel Hadam, the blood avenger, disappeared from Israelite society, even before the conclusion of the biblical process. The broader point for us to recognize is that the Bible is a series of attempts to raise the level of civilization of its first audience. They still had polygamy, they had indentured servitude and other features of society that we regard as unworthy of the Jewish ethical imperative. The Bible asked its people to improve in many areas of ethical life, but they were, after all, still a society with its entrenched ways. What the Bible could not successfully eradicate right away, it ameliorated. Later strata of Judaism continued that task. The task continues today. The quest for human dignity and purposefulness is still incomplete. It is not those who seek to reproduce the actual compromises of 3,000 years ago, but those who recognize where the Bible has been trying to take us, who are its most faithful audience. May we be among that congregation. Amen.